as it was when Adam and Eve were first placed in Gan Eden, we're getting back to that same frame of mind. Life needs a lot of justification. What is for sure, what needs no justification, is serving your purpose. That's reality. And that's why today, the antidote, the solution, the cure to this suicidal kind of indifference to life, the antidote is, do you know why you're created? Let's get a little philosophical here for a moment. What is God's plan? And what is this process where God has a certain goal in mind, but he has not yet reached it, and it can be reached only through our involvement, our becoming his partner in creation, and then it can become. What is it that's supposed to happen that isn't? Or what went wrong? How is it that God's world isn't what he wants it to be? It'll become. But how did it originally turn into something he was not happy with? Before God created the world, the Zohar says, before God created the world, there was just God and his name. And then to create the world, God took his light, his infinite light, and put it aside, moved it to the side, leaving a dark space. Into this dark space, God created the world. And that's why the first thing God said was, let there be light. Because there was a dark space. Because of the absence of light. So into this space in which the world is going to exist, God brings light. Now, what is all this metaphor of light and space? Very simply, before God created the world, there was one reality. God was real. Creating the world meant that God created another reality. That there was God and there was creation. Now, in the beginning, there was God and there was creation, but creation was intensely aware of the reality of God, slightly aware of its own reality. Later, as the generations declined, it wasn't that people were intensely aware of God and slightly aware of themselves. They were as aware of themselves as they were of God. Further yet, there came a time when people were much more aware of themselves and slightly aware of God. And then there came a time when people were very aware of themselves and not at all aware of God. Unless someone came and hit them over the head and proved to them and showed them and inspired them, otherwise they're not aware at all. The objective is that even though there exists a world which has an awareness of itself, the goal is that in this world, the awareness of God becomes total. So that there is no distinction between God and creation. Because creation thinks and feels and experiences exactly the same thing God experiences. And that is God. Let me put it in simple words. When God is the reality, and I am just slightly real, like, let's say, Adam and Eve, when they opened their eyes, when they were first created, what was their experience? What did they feel? What did they think? What did they notice? What was their experience? I'm hungry. What else is there to eat? Not at all. Their awareness was of God. And so their first question was, what does God want? What did God create us for? Now, if you say, what does God want? Obviously, you're experiencing yourself. Because what does God want of me? So you have some awareness of yourself, but it's very slight. The dominant awareness is of God. It's God's world. We are God's creation. What does God want? If God had said, I want you to weed the garden and water the animals, give the animals, and you are not allowed to eat anything, so you don't have very long to live, they would have said, fine. 10 minutes? Okay. 10 minutes of life, a half hour, whatever. 5,000 years later, you come to someone and you say, God wants you to fast on Yom Kippur. And a person says, oh, give me a break. I'm hungry. I can't fast. I'm not good at fasting. I get headaches. It's not a question of, are you going to do what God says or not? It's a question of your reality. The reality is, I need to eat. That's for sure. Whether I need to fast as a fulfillment of some divine commandment, I'm not sure about that at all. I'll think about it. But that I need to eat, I need to eat. I really need to eat. Whereas with Adam and Eve, they don't need anything. And so if God says, you don't eat, you die, so fine. What's wrong with that? God is the reality. So whatever he says is fine. He created us for 10 minutes and we die because we don't eat? Okay. That's what life is. But now we take life for granted, not its creator. So I feel my life, that's my reality. So anything that furthers my life, I can relate to, I can understand. Anything that contradicts my life, where is this coming from? What kind of reality is this? In simple terms. It used to be that no matter what else is going on, and no matter what you may say, and no matter what you may think, I have to live. I have to live. Life may be very difficult, and life may be very painful. And let's say in the times of the Holocaust, life may even seem ridiculously grotesque. But you gotta live. You gotta live. So if in a barrack someplace, in a concentration camp, somebody was losing grip on life and was beginning to think, maybe just let me die, leave me alone, everybody would jump on him and say, what are you talking about? You gotta live, you gotta eat, you gotta stay alive. And that made a lot of sense to everybody. You have to live. Do you have to make a bracha? If you're religious, if you promised your grandmother that you would, if you believe that God will get angry if you don't make the bracha. But do you have to make the bracha? Like you have to live? No. No way. So what was the reality? What was the unquestioned assumption? The unquestioned assumption is one must live. God is something to believe in. It's nice. It's good. Important. Must? A must. You have freedom of choice. Today, that's not necessarily the truth anymore. Today, if you say to someone, but you must live, their answer is, I don't must anything. I have freedom of choice. There's that guy with the van. He can always come around, and I don't have to live. Why do I have to live? I'll live if I want to. I don't have to. There isn't this reaction to life, this survival instinct that says, at all costs, I must live. I don't must live. I'll check out death, see what that's like for a while. And if I can't come back, so I won't come back. I mean, there of course are the extremes of that, you know, with suicides and with death pacts and all sorts of things. But there's also the more subtle forms of depression and emotional death, where if things aren't going so well and there's tension in your life and the business is falling apart and the relationship is falling apart, and your boyfriend just said that he found somebody better, then you go into this emotional tailspin, and if it means you'll never come out, so you'll never come out. It means you'll never leave your room again, so I'll never leave my room again. But that's not life, so it's not life, so it's death. Call it what you want. And that, of course, produces a whole new kind of sickness, a whole new kind of illness, which is described as an immune deficiency. Your immune system is not fighting off the disease. And everybody wonders why. What's wrong with your immune system? Why isn't it fighting off the disease? Because you don't care. It's a reflection of the attitude. The immune system can also be called the survival instinct. When the survival instinct is not so intense, so the immune system is not so intense. So when you wonder, why isn't the body fighting off this illness? Why isn't the mind fighting off the mood? Why are you so willing to curl up and die? It's the same thing. But why is this happening today? What is this thing about as soon as something goes slightly wrong, all right, forget it, never mind, I don't care. Where's this coming from? Where's I don't care? I can't have it my way? Fine, I'll die. I mean, they used to write books about it. If you were dying because you couldn't have something you wanted, this was stuff for major novels. Today, it doesn't even make a good book. Now, possibly, and here's the philosophical underpinning here. As we get close to Mashiach, the world starts to shift the balance from that assumption of reality in life to the discovery of reality in God. And that's why, since we are so close to Mashiach, this unquestioned conviction that you must live doesn't exist anymore, because it's not true. Our existence is not the dominant reality. The dominant reality is our purpose. So it's almost like back to Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve had no, I'm guessing now, Adam and Eve had no survival instinct whatsoever. I mean, they hadn't gotten so attached to life that they would fight to survive. Life was rather new. And as far as they were concerned, you can take it or leave it. They had no survival instinct. Their only instinct was one of serving. Why were we put here? But to fight, to stay here at all costs, they had no such instinct. And as we get back or closer to the condition of Gan Eden, as it was when Adam and Eve were first placed in Gan Eden, we're getting back to that same frame of mind. Life needs a lot of justification. What is for sure, what needs no justification, is serving your purpose. That's reality. And that's why today, the antidote, the solution, the cure to this suicidal kind of indifference to life, the antidote is, do you know why you're created? Do you know that as you are, exactly in the condition in which you find yourself, you are indispensable to the Creator? Not that He needs you to do what you're doing. He needs you to do something you're not doing, but exactly as you are. And that takes the emphasis and the weight away from the fact that you are to the why you are. And that's the way it was when the world was perfect. And that's the way it's going to be when Mashiach comes. So we are getting closer to that. We're beginning to instinctively sense that. And so the intensity of our survival instinct and life at all costs doesn't exist anymore. It's not true anymore. We've outgrown that. And today, what we need to hear and what is convincing and compelling is why we are here. Not that we are here. The meaning, the rest of the story, behind the story of a chassid who came to the Alter Rebbe, and he said, I had a very successful business, and I supported many families through the business. I employed many families, and I made commitments to many people that as my profits increase, I will increase assistance to them and help them through their projects, and help one marry off his daughter and help another one get his own business started and so on. And then all of a sudden, the business went bad. And it's terrible because now I can't support the families who worked in my factory, and I can't fulfill my promises to the people who I made the promises to. And Alter Rebbe listened to all this, and finally he said, you're telling me all the things that you need from God. You haven't said anything about what God needs from you. That's it. That's the whole story of creation, the whole drama, the whole cosmic scheme. The world as it is ultimately supposed to be is a world in which we don't feel and experience ourselves as reality. We experience God as reality. Exile means that the world is confused, is in darkness, and everything is upside down. So instead of the reality being God, the reality becomes me. That I am becomes more important than why I am. That's Golus. That's exile. Geula means, redemption means that Mashiach comes and rights the world so that the world is right side up. And that means that the reality and the dominant awareness is of God. And the self, the life, the existence, is devoted to the service of God. So that the why of existence is once again properly more important than the fact of existence. And possibly that's why we're beginning to show those symptoms. That unless we know why we exist, we won't necessarily fight to remain in existence. So that when Mashiach comes and makes it clear and inspiring as to why we exist, everyone will react and respond and accept and come alive with that reality, because we're ready. 10 years ago, if someone wanted to convince you that why you exist is more important than that you exist, you would have fought it very, very hard. You would have resisted it. So how can that be? How can that be? How can a responsibility or a mission or a direction be more important than the fact that I am? Today it's much easier to relate to that. I am is not as convincing as it used to be. So we're reading today's portion in the beginning of Shmos. What are we reading about? The first redemption. Moshe comes to the Jews and says, it's time for redemption. It's time to leave. And the Jews couldn't hear him. And then Pharaoh said, what are they talking about? He heard rumors. The Jews are talking about redemption, leaving, going to Israel. He said, that's foolishness. That's childish talk. Get back to work. That's reality. You know what where you belong. You know what your job is. Work. Be productive. Go to work. Build a city. Build a pyramid. Whatever it is they built over there. So stop talking about these childish dreams. Redemption. What do you mean redemption? You live here. You work here. This is your job. Go build. Been here 200 years. This is reality. What are you dreaming? And Moshe says to the Jews, no, 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 this is not reality. This is all temporary. Remember, your grandfather Yaakov said, there will come a time when we will leave this country and we will go back to Israel. And they said, yeah, we all heard that. And yes, someday we will, but not today. Moshe said, yeah, today. They said, no, not today. Someday. It's good to have hope. Someday we will. So Moshe said, not someday, now, today. It's time. They said, no, it can't be. So God came and took them out of Egypt. As if to say, God decided when, and whether people were ready or not didn't matter. So when the day of Passover came, God said, this is it. You're out. Ready or not? Problem is that they weren't ready. And that's why so many times in the 40 years of wandering in the desert, there were so many times when they had these thoughts about going back. Why would they want to go back? Things weren't so nice there. But nice or not, that was the reality. So every now and then, in the course of those 40 years, they would stop suddenly and say, what are we doing? This is nuts. Wandering in a desert? What are we, crazy? This is not real. So when things got a little bit difficult, they said, you see, this whole thing was a pipe dream. Grow up. Be realistic. Let's go back to Egypt. Not because it was so good. It was real. It was normal. There was the slave driver, and we were the slaves, and we built, and they enjoyed. That was the... But what is this wandering in desert eating food from heaven? What are we, crazy? This is not real. Because they weren't ready. And the result was that a couple of 100 years later, they were no longer in Israel. They were someplace else again. Babylon. It didn't take. The redemption didn't take. It was only temporary. But this time, when Mashiach comes, we are ready. We don't have any other reality that we're going to keep running back to. Because life itself is no longer a compelling reality. What we are here for, why we are here, that's compelling. Nothing else is. So as soon as we get focused on that, we have the fulfillment of a prophecy. On that day, God will be one and his name will be one. There'll be only one reality. Him. Which is, that's it. That's the vast eternal plan. That's why Hasidus came along at this late stage, because what Hasidus says is, mitzvahs are not to make you a wonderful human being. Mitzvahs were not given so that the human condition can be exemplary. The mitzvahs were given so that there is no difference between creator and creation. Total oneness. Because the creation is completely wrapped up in why, and the why is its creator. So there's only one reality. That's the purpose of Torah. That's the purpose of mitzvahs. And that's a preparation for the coming of Mashiach, so that we are not like the generation who came out of Egypt, who weren't really quite ready. Which explains one more thing. In Kabbalah it says that the Jews of this generation are reincarnations. We are reincarnations of those souls who left Egypt but never made it to Israel. In other words, we started being redeemed. We started into Geula, and we never finished because we didn't make it to Israel. We died in the desert during those 40 years. So now, to complete the cycle, we left Egypt in the first redemption, and we will arrive in Israel in the final redemption. Because the first time we did it, but we weren't ready. This time we're ready. Still awake?
How can we say that God is wrong that television stuff wrong?
We're not saying God was wrong.
said, it was too early, we weren't ready. How could God make a mistake and send us out too early?
Yeah, it wasn't a mistake. It was time to go.
It was too early for the Jews.
Right, so it wasn't going to be a permanent, it wasn't a mistake.
So you should have waited.
There'd be no one left. No, he couldn't wait anymore. For whatever reason, there was no more time for waiting. So it had to happen. So it did. But because we weren't ready, what happened was a temporary or partial geula. Not that it shouldn't have happened, or that it was a mistake. It had to happen. And it's almost like in any growing process, eventually a child grows up and has to leave the home. But you don't do that all of a sudden. If you've never been away to camp for 3 weeks, how are you going to get married and move out? You're not used to being away. So you go away for a couple of weeks and you come back, and then you kind of get used to, you know what I mean? You break in slowly. You don't go from one extreme to another. So possibly this unprepared stage is a necessary stage, because you're not going to be prepared from 0 to 100. You got to. Huh?
God didn't prepare. He didn't prepare the Jews by letting them leave for a week and then coming back to Egypt.
Well, in a big picture, it was. We left Golis for a couple of 100 years and then went back into Golis. And this time we stayed away for longer, so we kind of got used to it. So in all things, there's an intense first experience that doesn't last, like a honeymoon. It's wonderful, wonderful, but it doesn't last, because that's just the initial experience before you're quite ready to settle down. But it's a necessary one. You can't skip it. You can't say, well, then just wait until you're old enough to not get excited about the honeymoon. By then you're too old to raise a family. So all first experiences, all beginnings are intense but short-lived. And then when that excitement quiets down, then you can go back and do it right. But not that the first time is a mistake.
Why are we ready now?
Because we've given up we've outgrown all dependencies. So when Moshe came to the people in Egypt and said it's time to go, God said to go. As much as they suffered in Egypt, and as difficult as life was, they were attached to it. And on a very petty level, when Moshe came to the people and he said, we're going to go, we're leaving Egypt, the reaction was, well, what am I going to do with my donkey? Can I take my donkey? What about my house? Well, it wasn't much of a house. It was a slave's quarter. But it was my house. So there was an attachment there. Through the 3,000 years of Jewish history since then, we have been challenged by God to disavow every form of attachment. Everything. Can you give up your home if it's necessary for your survival as a Jew? The answer is yes. We've done it a number of times. We gave up our home in Spain rather than convert out of Judaism. We gave up our home in Portugal and in England and in France. Every one of those countries had an expulsion, which meant either convert or leave. We left. In other words, we outgrew the attachment to home and familiar surrounding. And we went out, we wandered out into the world, because if that's what it took to remain Jewish, we did that. There were times when we were very wealthy, and we had to give up our wealth. We did it. There were times when we were very poor and had to accept the poverty. We did that. There were times when we were very accepted in society. We remained Jewish. There were times when we were very ostracized by society. We remained Jewish. So it's almost as if at this point in history, what other test can God possibly have for us? What haven't we already shown over and over again we will do without, if that's what it takes to be Jewish? We'll do without anything. We're willing to do without anything if that's what it takes to be Jewish. So what other attachment, what dual loyalties do we have? None. But now it's gone a step further. It's not just a question of things to have or not to have. What about life itself? What was more precious to a person than his life? We're willing to give that up too. Not give up our life, give up the preciousness of life. Oh, we've given up our lives a lot. More than enough. But now it's not a question of dying for the cause. Now it's, I'm not even attached to life. I'm attached only to the purpose of life. That means we're ready. We will never look back and say, well, maybe what? We've outgrown all attachments.
I don't know if that's the test.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know if everyone has to. I think, you go by majority. You go by
America, you would say majority is that's the test.
I think so.
There's a law in America.
There's the expression of turning the corner. Once you've turned the corner, once you've introduced a new possibility, you don't have to wait until everybody catches on. As soon as you get that direction going, as soon as it's moving in that direction, then we're ready. Because it's only a matter of time. Everybody will catch on. So instead of just sitting here waiting for everyone to catch on, we're in that direction. It's fine. We're on the, we're on the home stretch. So Mashiach can come now. It's not as if we're not ready. Good. What's exciting about looking at what's going on in the world, looking at what's happening in today's Torah reading, looking at what's written in Kabbalah, what's written in Hasidus, and all of a sudden it all becomes the same. It all becomes the same idea. That this thing about how we are the reincarnation of that generation of souls. It all ties together. It's all the same thing. As we were talking about the oneness of Torah, the Torah has one message, and wherever you look, you'll find that message. Whether it's in the Kabbalah of Torah, or the Parsha of the Torah, or the philosophy of the Torah, it's all saying the same thing.
Partner with Rabbi Friedman. Visit itsgoodtoknow.org/support.